I'm just out here walking around, taking in the cool of the evening. And as I pass by plum trees and um, some cuttings of plums that I have in pots, I thought not many people ask about plum trees for bonsai or how to take care of them. And quite frankly, I haven't really uh, considered plum trees for a while, even though I have plum trees. And this right here was a cutting that I stuck in a pot a few years back, and I just took it out of that pot and cut it back and put it into this container. Well, to talk about plum trees, one of the things about them is that you have to be rough with it. You have to have that tough love. In other words, you have to cut plum trees back a lot to keep everything viable and vibrant, because as these branches and twigs grow out, a lot of the stuff behind it will get older and set in its way, and it's more difficult to bring out anything new quickly. So what you have to do every so often is cut it back pretty hard. Let's say I've got this branch here coming out, and there's a bifurcation here. You can see some buds along the edge here. So this year I let it bud out, everything is fine, but next year I'll cut it back as far back as I can to keep the division going back here. Well, what's going to happen is something back here will bud out, and that will give me more ramification, more branching, that is. Plus, it regenerates the plant closer to the main trunk or the main branch, which will give you a better plant overall. It's pretty much the same with any plant that we're using as bonsai, but in this case, it really revitalizes the plant to where you can have something that looks nice. Whereas, you know, a lot of your other plants, they're slower to grow out away from the tree and to divide off. So once you get it set, you have a lot more time to play with it, in my estimate, than you will with this plum tree, for example. I'll go over here and show you. So we'll take a look at this tree that I have in the pot. Okay, so you see this tree, okay? And there are very few bifurcations on here, very few branches that are, you know, has its secondary and tertiary branching, because I cut this back really hard. As a matter of fact, I even lopped this out. I forget how much taller this was at the time. And this is not anything that I really care about. It's just a plant that I stuck in a pot just to have something around here. Okay, and it's the same plum trees that I have in the ground. And the plums on this, about 1.5 to 2 inches, generally speaking, you know, kind of reddish color. So now you can see the back budding on this, even on the trunk. You can see lots of, well, a good amount of back budding further down on that stem right there. And you can see the flowers developing, the flower buds. You can see them developing out here. But you see how old, how dark and craggy this wood is back here? That's what you have to overcome, and that's why you want to cut your plum trees back, or your Prunus. So anything in the family, you want to cut it back like this, pretty hard or severe over time. It's, even this branch down here, you can see the greenery on that. Well, that's going to revitalize this branch, more energy coming through it, and so this branch is going to thicken up, and it's going to be a better branch for me to use. This branch is relatively new, a year, maybe 2 seasons, and I can still bend this. Okay, so if I do get, the point where I'll either grab a piece of wire for something else, or if I find a piece of wire, I'll just pull that down and away from the plant to put some movement in it. Whereas this and this, they're older, and you don't want to really bend them. Yeah, if you put a little guy wire on it, you can just change the position of it. But basically, with that old bark, the old outer skin, yeah, you don't want to try to bend those. And you can see up here also back budding. But again, you see the flowers. So this will fruit out. But again, you have to cut it back pretty drastically from time to time. And I can show you something else. So I'm just out here in the evening, just taking a stroll. These are some cuttings that I took. As a matter of fact, some of this is that same plant that we just looked at. I stuck it in the pot just to see how much of it will take root. They root relatively easy for me right here. I mean, I've had larger pieces that I've rooted and smaller pieces, but you can see the flower buds are still coming out. That's a long linear piece. That's a shorter piece, and you can see it's putting out the greenery right there. And the same over here and back there. Okay, that's just plain sand. And those are just rosemary cuttings that I took and I cleaned that up the other day. And these are cuttings also. Okay, this tree right here, you see where I cut some of that stuff off, the edges, the end pieces. This tree is a grafted tree. This over this side is kind of the same plum that we've been looking at. This on this side is your wild or native plum. Hall's plum, Florida plum, American plum, whatever you want to call it. It's just a wild plum. And I grafted that a few years ago, and it's going like gangbusters. I get plums on it as long as I can keep the birds out of it. Okay, these are cuttings that I took in the fall, and so they're getting good moisture. The flowers are coming out, and even some of these I wanted to make sure that I did the best I could to get them to sprout out, so I sealed the ends of it all fresh when I cut them. Whereas that stuff down there, I just threw it in the pot. This I wanted to do the best I could to get it to root on some of the larger pieces. And you can see I didn't seal that or that. Well, that right there, that's sealed. Okay, but yeah, plums, they root pretty easily, and they make nice bonsai. But again, the training for that mainly is clip and grow. Just you can wire some of the very young branches or shoots that come out, but other than that, over time, just like your tree in the ground, you just cut it back and trim it. You'll get a general basic shape with your branches, and that's how you go. That silvery tree right there is a plum tree. The color of that plum and the color of this plum are different. That one is a darker plum, this one is a lighter plum, but they're basically the same size, you know, inch or so, up to about 2 inches in size, and no major difference in the taste. And that tree is also grafted. You can see one side is darker than the other. The bottom there is the wild tree. This coming on this side to the left, and then that over there is the grafted part. So I did those at the same time using my my old shears that I walk around here with. It was nothing special, and I used black electrical tape to seal it up or to close it up. And that's a grafted tree also. Onto you can see the tree behind it. You see the tree right there, and then that one's grafted. You see that knot right there? I grafted that up a little higher, and so they graft pretty easily, and they take to rooting pretty easily. This is a Stanley plum that I bought from a nursery years ago. It just sat there and did like nothing, and so I grafted the tree right there. It's just a little piece. You can see the knot, the different colors. That's the wild and that's the grafted, and it took off like anything. And I've got another tree out there also. Up, you can't really see it, but anyway, this is a tree that I bought, and you can see how spindly it is. And even though it's a Stanley and it's supposed to work in this zone 8, it does not do very well at all. You know, I get a little bit of fruit on it, you know, and most of it drops off or something like that. But since I grafted that onto the wild tree, I get better growth out of it. So I'm hoping this year I'll have a pretty good result. And again, if you want to do plum bonsai, you can do that. It's okay, and you just have to not be afraid to cut it back hard. The branches, not the trunk of the tree. And now you can see that right there. See that knot? Okay, all that to the bottom is the wild tree, and over to the right is the plum tree. See that little skinny plum tree on the side of it? Again, that was supposed to have been a Stanley plum tree that I ordered from a online nursery, and it just sat there doing nothing. But that part, the second year after I grafted it, it started putting out fruit. Whereas this tree, I think that it might have put out fruit once. Crazy. But again, what do I know? What do I care? I just do stuff. And this is Santa Rosa plum that I took an air layer off of a tree I had that was grafted to be a dwarf. And so I took an air layer, and of course it grows to its natural state. And I fused, you can see the tape right there, a few pieces right here. That's the air layer that I took, and then it's fused into the wild plum. And yeah, I had a wild plum tree here, but apparently it croaked. But again, it still works. And then I've got more plum trees back there that I've grafted. The Santa Rosa, the Stanley, or those other two wild plums that I've mentioned before. So anyway, plum trees for bonsai. It works. All right, that's my little talk. Sorry about that movement. More plums. This is a Santa Rosa plum. This is where I had my large tree. It was again grafted to be a dwarf, and as the shoots went up, I took the wild plums and did an approach graft or fusion onto the wild tree, between the wild tree and the Santa Rosa. Well, it died, but I still have this alive. You can see that shoot right there on that wild tree. And so I've managed to save more of the Santa Rosa plum by doing that. The tree goes up here, and I've fused that right there, just taking some tape, cutting into that. The flowers that you see now are all of the wild plums. They hit about a week to, well, about 2 to 3 weeks before any of the cultivated plums, and that's kind of my downfall on getting a really good crop. These wild plums require less cold hours than the cultivated plums, no matter what the variety is. They, generally speaking, require more cold hours. When I mentioned the damson or the Stanley plums, those are your purple plums, prune plums, and they require even more cold hours than the Santa Rosa or those other two colored, the red and the purple colored smaller plums that I mentioned that are about 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter. But anyway, the genius that I am, I cleaned up in here a little bit, and I whacked the one branch. Well, it was one of the better branches that I had fruit on already, that I fused the Santa Rosa onto this up here. So it's like, oh well, there goes that little deal. But nonetheless, that's why I always keep a backup, always keep a supply around. That's why I've got plums in the back and plums up here, so that if something goes wrong, I've always got something to fall back on. So now I pretty much am finished with grafting this year. So whatever survives, survives, and whatever fails, fails, and I'll just go from there. But anyway, if you want to make your plum tree into bonsai, that's one way of starting. Grafting onto some of the wild stock, and then, you know, when the time is right, dig it up, and it'll give you a pretty good start. Or you can, let's say this piece right here, if I wanted to, I could air layer this off, cut it back of course, and then I'll have a pretty nice stump. So different strokes for different plum trees, or something like that. But anyway, that's that.